You're listening to the Around the Lens podcast, the home of high-quality, roundtable, visual journalism discussion about the news, topics, and gear related to our career field. Now, here's the host of our show, David J. Murphy.
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 204. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, with my co-hosts, as always, Travis Keys and Evelyn Hochstein. Hello, co-hosts. How are you doing tonight?
What's going on
today?
Good. Hey, everybody.
We're good.
Glad to join you here.
Travis, it looks like you changed your backdrop.
I know, isn't it wonderful? This is my new house. I hope it's very beautiful. I hand drew all of it myself. No, I'm actually in Nassau, Bahamas now. I was shooting here for the last week, but flying back to New York tonight and back to wonderful weather. Hopefully. Probably not.
Yeah. Not compared to the Bahamas,
Not
that's
at all.
for sure.
No.
All right. Well, are you enjoying yourself down there? Having a chance to take a little time off from the work and enjoy yourself a little bit, or is it everything?
I've been down here for like 5 days, and I only really shot 2 days. I mean, they pushed me on those 2 days, but it was fabulous. I couldn't complain. If I get to do this every day of my life, I'm a happy man.
How do you work
Nice.
5 days and 2 days shooting? Give us some pointers. 5 days of free time, 2 days.
When you have a really good person that hires you, they negotiate amazing things. The hotel rooms, the food. I mean, I literally feel like I'm not working. I'm the guest. I've been treated so well. It's been really, really, really wonderful.
Nice. Can you reveal your client, or is that too much?
Yeah. That one I can't.
Will we see any sort of behind-the-scenes videos from anything you're doing down there?
Well, if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, you can usually figure out some stuff because there's definitely stories and pictures that sneak into that. So, yeah, I definitely throw stuff into there.
Great, exciting stuff. Awesome. Well, best job in the world right there. Getting the
Not bad. When I work with a lot of brands, companies, and celebrities, sometimes you just can't show those pictures.
Right. Okay.
They get to use them.
And Evelyn, which tropical paradise are you calling us from this week?
The cold and wet tropical paradise of Washington, D.C., but always paradise to me. So, yeah, I'm back home. I'm sorry I couldn't connect with you guys last week. I did try from South Carolina, but it was just...
I like the whole idea of remote reporter out in the field. See if we can make that work. It was awesome.
It was really fun. It was a great spot. It was really fun to be on the trail with Mayor Pete. I hadn't really done that before. And but, yeah, we were in a town called Round O, South Carolina, and no network. But glad to be back this week. Yeah.
Well, you gave it an admirable try, and we appreciate that. So thank you. And glad to have you here in D.C. where, decent internet connection, and we can talk to each other and see each other. That's very important. And as we've said, the last few weeks, it's a real dry spell out there in D.C. I mean, just really nothing to cover, right? Slow news, no news, right?
Yeah. There is absolutely nothing to cover. Ironically, I have hardly been here covering it. I was, So I've missed all of the dry spell, I guess, in DC. So thank you for me as a freelancer. There you go.
Indeed. Are you going to be getting back on the Hill and doing any other documentation now that things are kind of going back into full swing?
Probably not. Not really my focus. Maybe out of curiosity, but no. I mean, I do like the outsides. I did Jane Fonda and the Fire Drill Friday protest on Friday, and that was really just a hoot and fun and interesting and inspiring. But no, I don't have any specific impeachment plans, but you never know.
Okay, great. I would say go to probably one of these local Washington area bars on the day that perhaps decisions get made, and I'm sure you'll get some interesting shots. That would be my.
And so DC people, oh my gosh, it's like go find a bar and get reaction shots, and it's often a challenge, but I do it a lot. So yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. Indeed. All right, well, let's introduce our guest this week, Elizabeth Herman. Please tell the audience about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here with you guys. I am a freelance photojournalist. I'm based in New York City. I'm also a PhD candidate in political science. I'm working on my degree at UC Berkeley, but I'm remote while I'm working on my dissertation and freelancing out here. I've been freelancing for about 9 years and have worked a lot on a range of things, mostly focusing on portraiture and reportage, often looking at issues of gender and issues of identity, looking at sort of political dynamics and how history is written and remembered and why. So that's kind of like, if you had to run a through line through all of my work, even if it seems very disparate, that's sort of the thing that connects it in my mind. But yeah, so I've most recently worked on this project that just came out as a book back in October on the women of the 116th Congress that was originally ran as a special section in the New York Times. And I know we'll get more into that later, so I can save that for later. But it was kind of a dream project that really nicely got to draw on all of these things that I'd been thinking about and working on in different ways for a while. So we actually started it exactly a year ago. It was December 13th was the day that we got the green light to go ahead with the project. So this time of year is really like bringing about flashbacks of, sleeping very little. Thank you.
Was there any chaos or drama when you were shooting it? Like what, flashbacks? What? Any good story?
I mean, the government shut down. There was no impeachment proceedings, but the government was about to shut down. And all the new members were about to be sworn in the second week that we were shooting. There was no drama per se, but there was just a lot of, it was from when we got approval on the 13th, the first day we started shooting was the 18th. And it was 130 portraits that we shot basically over 5 days with like a couple other sprinkled. So, and coordinating 130 portrait like sessions with 130 members of Congress and their staff is,
easy.
many emails. So yeah, but it was great. It was a super sort of dream project to get to work on.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's something we call in the military when you have to deal with very high-ranking officials is herding cats. Sometimes that can be, I'm sure it relates to very high-ranking people in the world of politics.
Yes.
I have to imagine.
Yes, it's herding cats that also have to go and vote frequently. So, even if you get all the cats, it's have to go. Yeah. But.
Well, we're definitely going to dig much more into that. I'm very eager to kind of get more of your take on that situation and kind of how that project got sort of greenlit. But before that, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, if you're listening to us and you're wondering why we look different or why we sound different, please know that I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. My mouth is having technical difficulties speaking. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties. So this isn't, if you're the first time listening, watching, whatever, this isn't how it normally looks. It's a little bit more professional. Check out last week's great episode with Meg Handler and Michael Shaw. That's a pretty good example.
We thought we'd just do Throwback Monday today and kick it old school, go back to our roots. We just celebrated, episodes. Now we're just going back in time, keeping it fresh. And old,
back in season 1, season 2 time frame when we were just getting our feet wet. But anyways, so that's why things are a little bit different today. So I apologize for that. Beyond that, I just want to let everybody know that this show and every episode is sponsored by Patreon because we have a Patreon. And if you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/aroundthelens and hit us up there for as little as $1 a month. You get everything we produce early, to include this podcast. You get it a week early, as opposed to normal listeners who get it a week after. So if you're listening to this in your Patreon, you're listening to this right now. If not, you're listening to this a week later. So be sure to go over there, see what kind of perks we have. We've got a great book by Timothy Floyd. If you're interested, a $20 Patreon donation will get you that book. I'll be happy to send it. I have 2 copies still. So happy to share that with you all. Beyond that, good news on the Twitter front, and we'll talk about this when we get to the Twitter story, but I do want to mention everybody who's watching. I was recently able to acquire the Around the Lens handle on Twitter. If you followed us on Twitter or knew anything about the Twitter story with regard to Around the Lens, I tried to get that one, but somebody had it, and so I was working over the last 3.5 years, 4 years to try and get that handle. And instead I had to use the handle Around Lens, which is fine, but it was not, I was like always pining for the one. No. And it's like, it wasn't even like if the guy was using it and like they had a fully fledged Twitter account that was active and engaged, I've been like, okay, well, too late. That was my miss. I should have
real.
talked this.
I can't get TravisKeys.com. Someone owns it, and it's like the last 8 years. It's been one picture. They haven't done anything with it. It's a picture of their newborn infant. So I had to go Travis W. Keys, and one day I'm going to own that sucker back.
Just find out when it expires, and then
it's already expired.
Again,
I think it's on an auto renew or something like that. I think the next one's in a year or something like that.
That's the worst when it's like
he's not doing anything with it.
Right. When they're not doing anything with it, it's like that's 10 times worse than if they're actually doing something with it. Because it's like,
I know your kid's grown up.
So
please put a new picture.
Exactly. Come on. You're probably like their biggest fan because you go to the website all the time.
Exactly.
It's like,
we get getting 3 hits a year.
Indeed.
We keep this going.
Yeah. So, anyways, at Around the Lens is the Twitter handle that we're using now. So if you followed us on Twitter before, I'm no longer going to be updating at Around Lens. Please follow at Around the Lens, and you'll stay up to date on everything that we post on Twitter. So that's it for housekeeping. Let's go into the topics of this week. So we're nearing the end of the year, right? And so I'm archiving my content. I'm backing up my content. I'm looking at my file structure. I'm thinking about all the photos I shot over the year. I'm kicking myself for not doing my due diligence in terms of file naming conventions and captioning and keywording and all the stuff that you should be doing with your photo archive. Even with your personal archive, I think you need to be doing that kind of stuff because it makes it that much easier to like look through and stuff. When I'm trying to find, photos or videos from my son's past birthdays, over the last 5 years, because he just turned 5 on December 1st. And so I'm making a little video. So I was like searching through stuff and I can find it eventually. But if I had it like a good system in place with good keywords and good spell, captions or whatever, or something, I think I could have found it a little bit faster. But I want to throw it to you all and see kind of how you archive your stuff. Some of you, again, you work commercial work, you work freelance work, you work personal work. I would say probably that all of you do more professional photography than I do on a regular basis. So how do you archive your stuff and how does that differ from your personal work to your professional work? And I'll throw it over to our guest first.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. You get the first go.
Sure. I mean, I've had a system in place since 2015, I think, which maybe means that I need to update it, but it's been working so far. I do the year folder, months folder, day folder, and I do it manually just in case like a shoot went past midnight, I want to keep it all in the same folder. And I do the same thing for my personal work. So everything, I'm a person that remembers things by dates and I have everything in my calendar. So I can very easily keyword search my calendar for whatever I shot or keyword search my email for the assignment notes and then cross check and pull up those photos that way. I don't use keywords ever, which is maybe bad, but I know I'll like use different keywords that are slightly off for whatever it is. And then I'll, not be able to pull it up that way. So it feels like it's not worth the investment and the time in creating like a keyword search database. But what I do use is I keep everything in Lightroom from assignments with all the captions. So I can go back and if I'm putting together a new edit or I need something for my website or I'm submitting something to a contest, I can go there and create a new edit and all the metadata is in there. So I make sure that I keep all the caption information and all the sort of final takes from anything that I've shot set up in Lightroom so that I can always go back. And whether it's last year or, 4 years ago, I can still pull out those files. And I also have then for all of my final edits that I submitted to whatever client or publication I worked with, I have sort of a separate folder that has subfolders by publication so I can get to those quickly. So it's very convoluted. It works for me. I don't know how you'd replicate it, but I love it and it is helpful and I know what I need to back up when it needs to be backed up.
So you said you use Lightroom. So you're having a multi-year archive or catalog with everything you've shot over the last 4 years. Is that pretty much how you're structured?
Yeah, at some point my Lightroom crashed and I decided to just sort of start fresh again so I could be more organized. So anything before 2015 isn't in this Lightroom, but I have it saved on other drives. But yes, I have the whole workflow system is like I import, I create those folders. I preview things in Bridge. I make my selection, then I bring the things that I want to edit into Lightroom. So
Because I have heard Lightroom gets bogged down once you put like a whole lot of content in it. I don't use Lightroom. That's just things I've heard, that it slows down the more you put in. And so people have had philosophies about how you sort of archive in Lightroom. So they might create like a catalog per shoot or a catalog per year. Do you do something like that? Or is it, again, like say you've just been doing since 2015 and on?
I have the pre-2015 catalog saved on an old drive, and then maybe with 2020 I will archive this catalog. And the only thing is that I've been using things that are in this catalog quite a bit. So as soon as sort of like I'm no longer referencing old projects, I think that I'll put this one away. But so far I've still been referencing it a bunch. Yeah. Or maybe I'll migrate over those things that I'm referencing, or whatever the case might be.
It's interesting you mentioned that you check your calendar to kind of find out when things were shot. I do the same thing with Facebook because, again, a lot of the stuff I shoot is personal. So I'm out maybe shooting some portraits of my family or whatever. I'm going to post something to Facebook right then and there, perhaps, and then I'll archive. So if I'm looking for something, I can usually use Facebook as a pretty good indicator of when and where that was shot.
I was going to make a joke that I use Facebook timeline as my archive, but no, you went there for real.
I use my camera roll on my phone because I'll often have,
there you go.
Like, I'm not great about posting things, and not great. I really, especially when it comes to personal photos, I sort of like, they end up on maybe an Instagram story, maybe for close friends, but that's it. So I think that, but I have everything. I kind of just take photos as a form of keeping a diary, as a form of jogging memories. So
I actually use the almost the exact same workflow you do, except everything pre-2016 is in one catalog, and then I went to the year 2017, 2018, 2019. But and then I instead of using I also, everything I've ever shot is somewhere entered on my Google Calendar, so I can trace back to who I shot when so I'll have a name. So all my photo shoots are who the name was, or who the event was, or who the subject or topic or the person hiring me was. So I track it by names and stuff like that. And it's all dated and all stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
you break the folder structure via year, month, and day as well?
For me, it's all year and then name. So like if I shot you, David, it would be 2019, David, and that would be I would just look for your name because I know I was looking for you. So everything I shot of you would be in that folder.
Okay, so you don't even break it down by month or day. You just
that's in the file structure. When I name my files, it'll have the date and the subject and the name of who I shot, so I can look through it. That's the one great thing about Lightroom, sort of why I'm tied into that ecosystem. There's so many different ways to break down into catalogs and categories and stuff, and really kind of just type in a name or a number or a date into the and you can find exactly what you're looking for. And the more you keyword and do stuff, the easier it makes it. I wish I was a little more thorough. Like if you wanted to, like every time you shot a red shoe, put red shoe in a keyword, every red shoe would ever pop up that you've ever shot. But I just don't have time for that.
A keywording thing is like, if you got I commend people who have the due diligence to actually keyword their stuff, and I need to be that person because it's like it's so much. What I like to is AI now with like if you use Google or use some of those things, they'll automatically keyword some stuff for you. I don't know if that's
a picture of my cat. You got cat, and all your cat pictures come up, and
it doesn't just know that it's your cat; it knows the name of your cat, and it could pull up every Google Photos, especially with this. I don't know. I was looking through, a friend pulled up their Google Photos and they typed in cat, and it didn't just bring up cat, it brought up a subcategory of the name of their cat. And I was like, and they're like, I did not save my cat's contact in my phone. Like I never assigned my cat's name to photos of it at any point. It's really, that's another topic for sure.
Whole nother level.
I know, right? Indeed. And so just so I understand, for you, Travis, you have a folder that's like assigned to year. And then within that folder, each shoot is assigned the folder name 2019.
I'll name the folder of whatever I'll remember. If I did a big shoot for Robin Hood, or if I shot, Pharrell, a celebrity, it would say Pharrell. It might say, where or something like that. But it's really just a keyword from my own mind that I know, like if I'm looking for that one person, like it's real easy because in my head, the dates, I am not going to have any clue. I could look back on my Google Calendar, which is, everything. If I don't enter it there, it doesn't happen. So it's amazing to trace back for years. They're like, oh, when was that? I'm like, oh, I can look and just scroll back and find out where I was on that one day. But I name every folder by name.
Yeah, I run into that same issue because, well, at least in 2019, I had the folder for 2019. And then within that, I had each day that I shot. So it was like 2019, 10/2 for October 2nd, right? And that's all I did. And then I threw my photos in there. And so when I'm trying to look back, I have no idea what I shot on any particular day. Yeah. So what I actually did was I went through and added like folder names to each individual file. So it's still organized by date, but it also have some sort of descriptor, so I know what's kind of in that folder. But I know that's not a perfect system. And
it'd be nice to have one master folder, because I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, I need to pull something from 2017, and then I'm on a new assignment or a new shoot, and then I import into 2017, and now that folder lives in 2017, and we're in 2019. I know I could export it, but
yeah. So I actually went through and I labeled every single one of my date folders. And that's kind of how I did for 2019. So it makes it a little bit easier. But again, I'll talk a little bit more what I'm doing in 2020. But Evelyn, what do you do for your archival?
Staying extremely quiet because my organizational skills are terrible. So you guys are giving me a lot of inspiration for 2020, which is clearly going to be my New Year's resolution to better archive my photos. But basically, I don't use keywords. I think I rely way heavily on metadata, which is just terrible because I might not get more than the date. But no, I create a folder with usually the name, the subject's name, or the assignment. But then I'll look back and it'll be like VA hospital, Reston, edit. Like I don't, and I won't remember, exactly what it is. But I have a pretty good, but the more years that go by, it's getting harder. But I basically create a folder. Everything gets dumped onto a hard drive every year, and all my final outtakes, like what Elizabeth said, like my finals, I try to upload those to Photo Shelter so that they're in an archive there, because usually the outtakes that I've sent to a client are going to be the ones that I'm going to refer back to, and not like the original edit folder. So I basically have the raw files in one folder, an edit folder, loose edit, and then a final, which would be captioned and what I've filed. Then that last folder also goes to Photo Shelter. So that's my system, but it's beyond that. Dates, months, all of that stuff, I don't usually include, at least in the title. And it all gets done to the hard drive.
That final step of just immediately backing up your finals to your archive is the very good move. That's something that I'm like, every year I'm like, I'm going to do that. And then also register it with the copyright office, or just create a folder to register with it. Yeah. Oh, these are things that.
But usually if people Google or find your images or want to buy them, it doesn't happen that often, because when you work for newspapers, they often go to Getty or Redux or whoever. But it happens, or people find them and want to reuse them. They're usually finding something that's searchable because it's been published. So if I'm on the road or wherever, I don't have to do anything but go to Photo Shelter and send them a link. So it's a lot easier. Yeah. So that's my system.
Yeah, no, I mean, backup is a conversation for a whole other, episode. But what I just did was I backed up my entire 2019 archive to Amazon. So I have Amazon Prime. And if you have Prime, you have this as well. But you can have unlimited photo storage backup. And that includes the JPEGs, the RAWs, whatever you want to throw in there. It's free and unlimited as long as you have an Amazon Prime membership. So that's my off-site backup. In addition to that, I also have 2 hard drives for every photo I take. So I've got my 2019, I've got every single thing for the past 20 years archived on at least 2 hard drives, if not more. And then I, move one off-site somewhere like my office, and then I'll have one here in the house that I use. So that's kind of like, again, backup is a different discussion. But you mentioned something about how you organize within your folder. Evelyn, you mentioned you have raw, and you have edit, and you have selects, and you have final selects. I do something similar. Like I'll throw everything into a raw folder, and then I'll go through Bridge or some sort of platform and star them, make my selects, and then the ones that I'm actually going to edit, color, tone, if I'm going to caption them, whatnot, will go in sort of the final selects. What I was thinking about doing for 2020 was actually taking all my final selects and copying them into like a 2020 best of folder, right? So I'm not having to dig into the dates to get into something. Now, I know you can do this in Lightroom. You can create an album, right, of like your best work if you want to, or for instance, I think you mentioned, Elizabeth, you have your different publications and whatnot that you publish throughout the year. So that's, I think, a good way to kind of, as a sort of a reference tool, you can be like, oh yeah, look at that, shot I did. Because I noticed that like even on sort of the free browsers, for instance, I was looking at like what Windows offers, right? They'll take, your folders, however, it doesn't matter how you've structured them. They're just going to present you your imagery right there up front, and they'll organize it by date based on the metadata of when the image was captured. So it's a great way to kind of see your work. And I remember back a few years ago, I ingested like my entire archive into Lightroom one day. And it was amazing to see how many photographs I had completely forgotten about, or like shoots that I'd forgotten about. Because, again, when you scan the entire archive and present every single image, you're like, oh, wow, look, there's some gems. You ever do that? You ever kind of look back on your archive and like, oh, wow, this thing I shot 5 years ago, oh, there was some good stuff I missed.
So I think especially as we develop as photographers, things that we didn't look for the first time around, and that we've developed as shooters, we look at it a second time. It's like, wow, I had a great photo here, and we kind of bring a new life to it and a new edit to it. I mean, certainly, as a photojournalist, you don't edit like I do. I tend to do all kinds of wonderful things and accentuate and play with in Photoshop and Lightroom and all that kind of stuff. But I think I love going back and seeing my past stuff, and I pulled some amazing stuff out of it just recently. So I try and do that, every 6 months or something like that. Just really dive back in and just kind of go through, folders that that rarely do you go to your Lightroom and hit all photos and go through it one by one, and you can do that quickly. But sometimes I just do that and I'm like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know some people who delete like the photos they don't select, and some people archive everything. I'm a pack rat. I archive everything. But I know people who, whatever reason, they don't want to have all that baggage, slows down. They don't want to have tons and tons of hard drives. Are you guys pack rats? Do you archive everything, or do you delete and move on?
I never delete. You never know who you photographed, and you never know what you photographed. And I think that also is just important. I started doing darkroom, so had lots of negatives, and it always felt important to sort of save and catalog all of your negatives carefully. And I feel similarly about digital files. It's just my digital negatives, and I for similar reasons, I've not done the go back and look through all of your old photographs, but I hope to. I have a photo mentor that I worked with to go through his archive, and that was boxes of Kodachrome slides. But, it was going through his archive. He had his selects in a different box physically, and we went through those selects. But then the more interesting thing was going through all the things that never actually got scanned and it was a mix from photos of his family to photos of, assignments that he had shot, and he would pull out something, and he was doing a lot of sort of political stuff at the time. And it was a figure that wasn't big at that time and then has since gained. So it's just interesting to have that kind of historical references if you're shooting anything, and also for your own personal stuff. The things that I find most interesting going through photos from when my parents were kids are the photos that didn't get framed and hung up on the walls, Yeah. They have these timeless historical references in them that are now documents of history that are really interesting.
Yeah.
So one last thing I want to talk about on this particular subject is file naming convention, and then what do you output to your client? So like, for instance, my file name is the date and usually a sequence number. For the coming year 2020, I plan to put more information like location, event, maybe the camera type that I use. Since I have like 5 different cameras with me at any given time. I've got my Osmo Action, my GH5, GH4, my cell phone, because again, we're shooting on anything we have available to us. And then I'm taking these 5 different sources and throwing them into the folder. Sometimes it's good to know, like, what was that? Was that my wife's phone? Was that my phone? Was that, where are these images coming from? So that's kind of like, I'm going to be doing it. What are you all going to be doing? Or what do you do currently?
I always have, if I have some sort of keyword that corresponds to whatever it is. So if it's for the Times, then it's always NYT. And then I have the date, which is like the full year, month, day. And then I have a sequence number, and then I have the original file suffix number. So and that's helpful to find the corresponding raw file. So then I can either search, it's way easier than I always expect, but I just always keep the original, whatever the camera names the image, that's what I keep when I offload the images, and then I can cross search and find the original file really quickly.
Is that something that's dictated by your clients, or is that you decided that?
There's only, I think, one client that I shoot for that has a file naming convention that they want me to use. So everything else, it's sort of like whatever you want to file. It's more often the caption information that's dictated and very specific caption requirements. I think that it's just totally dependent on like who you're filing images for and I've surprisingly not more publications have sent out like revised file naming or caption and metadata conventions. I always expect that there will be more revisions to that than I've had or that I've experienced.
Yeah, the Lightroom's great because on import you can set up your templates and stuff like that. So I have it. It'll say TWKP is my as the photographer is my company, and then it'll have the only thing that is blank is right below that. You can have the you put in the shoot or the something, so you can name it on the spot. So everything is already completed in form of the template. So I'll have my name, I'll have the sequence, I'll have the date, and but I'm plugging in like who the client was and who the subject was on the fly. So everything else is so I just plug that in when I'm importing.
I keep the original camera name unless the client dictates otherwise, and I really also only have about one client that wants a certain name. So I'll convert if it's a raw file, and then I file a JPEG. And the sequence number, I'll always be able to go back to the original CR2 file if I need to find it. And it's not helpful in any kind of search, except for if you know exactly what number you're looking for. But I just leave them as the camera names them.
Okay, cool. Anything else anybody would like to add before we move on to our next topic?
Let's move it.
All right. Well, this goes straight back to you, Elizabeth. You pitched your story about the photo series about women in Congress to the New York Times, and they bought it. They agreed to. Now, do they fund it? Is that like they paid for it?
Yeah, this would not be something that, and also as a freelancer, this would not have been something that I would have been able to feasibly convince members of Congress to sit for portraits I personally think that I would not have been able to do that. It really needed the weight of a publication, and it needed the weight of a team that could, logistically coordinate this. So, yeah. So I went to them with an idea that I have sort of spoken about the genesis of the idea a good number of times, and I cannot tell you the moment where the idea came into my mind. I know the two things that sort of informed it the most was I was shadowing AOC on the election night that was pretty guaranteed that she was going to be elected, not the giant upset in the primary that she was in. So I was shadowing her that night and throughout the full day, and was just sort of struck by how different she looked in political spaces. She was doing all the sort of stereotypic political day of election activities. So going to our voting location and voting and meeting kids and speaking with voters on the street, doing all these things that we've seen politicians do forever, but she looked so visually different and had such a different background from politicians that you were used to seeing. So that was one component. In the previous year, I'd been at the National Portrait Gallery and seen all the presidential portraits. And you walk through that room and it's really striking. You notice that it's all sort of older white guys, and they're all portrayed visually in a similar way. And you have Barack Obama, but it's still all men. And you walk through and it's this idea of how power is visualized in this country. And it really sort of hits you that we are sort of conditioned to seeing power as being able to be occupied visually this one way. So those two ideas at some point formed in my mind. And I wrote this pitch to photograph members that represented shifts in representation. So new members in the style of historical portrait paintings. And I sent that to Marissa Swartz Taylor she's the DC editor at the Times. And separately, she and Beth Flynn, who's the deputy director of photography, had been having conversations about how to visualize the new class of women in Congress. It was going to be, for the first time ever, over 100 women serving in the House. Women are almost 25% of Congress at this point, or would be once the 116th was sworn in. So they had been having that conversation separately at the paper, which I didn't know about. And I sort of came to them with this concept. And so they took the idea. They wanted to take the idea and not just photograph new members, but photograph all the women. So Marissa came back and said, I really like the concept, but I think we should do all the women. And so I have done portraiture. I've worked with the Times a bunch, but I had not done political portraiture, and I had never done a project of this scale. And so it was a little frightening for sure. And also, I think the budget that I originally proposed was very, very low. I was going to crash on a friend's couch and go down. I originally pitched to shoot it on film to kind of have the historic. But it was and then all of a sudden, we were renting 2 studio setups and hiring assistants. And so it became a very different thing. So it went from this sort of this concept to what was going to cost a lot of money. And if it failed, I felt very responsible. So, and at that point, Marissa brought on a second photographer, Celeste Lohman, who's done a ton of celebrity portraits. So and as a portraitist, you really don't get to work with another portraitist a lot of the time. So it's part of what was amazing about the experience was getting to literally be in the same room shooting at the same time as someone else. And so, but the actual, so if I'm happy to talk more about the actual pitch or about the process of getting it greenlit or taking the pitch to fruition, whatever is the most helpful.
I think the concept of the pitch is what I think would be most valuable to know. I mean, obviously, the experience is great, and I definitely want to delve into that a little bit. But developing a pitch for a major news organization, like if I had an idea, right, where is even the first place I start? Do I have to build a slide deck in PowerPoint? Do I just call up somebody? Who do I call? I don't know anybody at the New York Times. Do I send an email? Do I just, where do I even start if I have? Where do I go from idea to like pitching it to getting a pitch that's actually going to be greenlit? And that can go, again, to all of you too. You can chime in on your experiences as well after Elizabeth. Yeah,
I think it varies so much depending on whether you're going with a finished product or whether you're going with an idea to be sort of shot, and why you're going with one versus the other. So in this case, this was a project that would only be feasible with the backing of a publication. And I think that the things that I thought about in developing this pitch,
I don't want to, but not just for money, but also for credibility, right?
I think one thing for like more.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to say like, hey, I'm really motivated and I want to shoot, I want to take photographs of female congressmen, like, great. And you are, and like, or you can go like, I'm with the New York Times. Oh, I'm listening. Yes. Right.
Well, and part of the thing, I'm a freelancer. I don't have an official email address. So when I was setting up some of the appointments, even though we had a letter, like a call sheet on a letterhead, it still took a couple of tries. And for some of the members, getting someone from the paper to send the email instead, because my email is not going to get the same. So that's 100% definitely a credibility thing.
Blaze at XXX69 is not going to get the same sort of traction that Elizabeth Herman at New York Times is going to get.
And so having some of the editors do some of the higher level scheduling was really important because I think that the thing that the pitch, all the advice that I've ever gotten on pitching ever is that you should do it because editors, especially editors that are really interested in sort of doing more in-depth projects, more sort of thoughtful visual stories, either as related to the news of the day or more feature pieces. They want pitches. They want well thought out pitches. They want pitches that won't sort of inundate their inbox. So be selective in what you are pitching and who you're pitching it to. make sure it's tailored to the publication that you're pitching it to, so that you maybe are referencing the vertical that it's going to run in, or you're saying it's similar to this previous thing that you've done. Why is it a good fit for this publication? And then why you as a photographer or as a person are specifically qualified to do this project. So what unique skills or unique experience do you have that can help you do this project, is sort of the advice that I've gotten. And the format that I use is just sort of, there's a line, one sentence summary, sort of the elevator pitch version, and then a paragraph, that's it, explaining the reason. In this case, it was the sort of historical references, the concept, and then a paragraph of logistics. So what is the budget? How many days? What's the approach? And then I included, in this case, the historical reference images. So, I think I had a portrait of Washington and Jefferson and I can't remember who the third one was. I think Eisenhower. And that was sort of the visual approach. And the idea was that we would replicate that in the photographs.
Cool.
How many, in your own work, how much do you have, you work on assignment to what you actually kind of pitch? What's the balance of that?
I have not been pitching I was much more proactive in pitching a few years ago, but as I've been sort of in dissertation writing phase, this was the first pitch that I'd sent. I've in the past had done a lot of sort of grant writing and pitching projects to sort of granting organizations, not so much to publications. But then, this is the first pitch that I'd worked on in I think about a year. And it was a pretty hectic time to begin with, but this idea came and I was like, I'm going to feel crummy if I don't write this up.
I mean, it's obviously the initial pitch was very different in your mind, and the scope of it grew so much. How much has that changed what you would now pitch and what you're dreaming of doing next? And it affected, what's you're going to be doing onward from this point? That's
a really good question. Part of it was that because this sort of was the first project that I was able to, I've done sort of longer term documentary projects on my own in the past. So I knew that I could do production and I could do a lot of the legwork, but I didn't know that was something that you could take to editors and say, I'm happy to help with the production. I'm happy to help with the research. I always thought that was sort of something that you'd do on the DL, or I'd done that in daily assignments, but not sort of as pitching it as part of my skill set to publications. And that's something that I think that there are many photographers that are much better photographers than I am. And I'm happy, but I think that I have other skill sets that make me qualified in different ways, that I can bring research background, or I could bring sort of a production background, these sorts of things that can make me maybe a better fit for certain assignments, even if there's a photographer that has or is better fit in other ways. So I think it's really about figuring out how you as a photographer are qualified. So to your question, I think that I would feel more comfortable pitching bigger projects that might have more research or production involved, because just to say that, and I'm happy to help on these things, this could be part of what I'm working with you on, or this is part of the package that comes with me when you hire me.
What was your initial, on this pitch, your biggest takeaway that you would give to someone that, wow, I pitched it this way, but going forward, I realized this is, I would change it, and I would recommend this is what you need to do going forward on a pitch?
That's an interesting question. I think that making sure that this wasn't in the actual pitch that I wrote up. This was sort of in the follow-up conversations that Marissa and I had. But I tried to make clear that I was happy to help with the legwork. I think that was something that sort of was a big part of because we were approaching the holidays. They were working on a lot of enterprise projects already. It was something that was not, I think I was more active in following up than I might have been in the past. And I think that was important. Yeah. I think important is to give space and be respectful and know that there's a whole process that a publication has to go through on their own. But I think that, I was trying to still do anything that could be helpful. So I started putting together a spreadsheet of all the members as soon as we started finding out whether that it was a possibility. I was like, I want to move as many of the barriers as possible to this getting approved. So I think that including more of those in the original thing. I think that I was really lucky that Marissa was really believed in it and really ushered it through this process. But I think that if you don't have that, then making sure that you are sort of making it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Something that is important.
Oh, awesome.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, as a freelancer, when you pitch a story, how do you, well, I don't know if you avoided it, but like, how do you, not sign maybe the contract where your images are going to be given to Redux for resale, or how do you negotiate those kind of sticky?
They were given to Redux for resale.
Okay.
The Times just, I think that, I think it depends on the publication. The Times actually has a really good research. So when we went to then turn this into a book, they were very protective, and they made sure that we were treated very, like, that we, were compensated and we were paid for, I think a lot of photo books you have to pay to get made. That was not the case for the photo book that we negotiated.
In conjunction with the New York Times.
Yeah, the Times actually negotiated the book contract and all that. So I think that it depends. I think it's about any contract. The Times' contract I signed in 2012. It was like a long time ago. And I'm, you always get paid whenever your photo gets sold, but I think that one thing that's hugely important that I've always tried to be careful about is reading all of the resale information in the contracts whenever I sign them. And I've gotten more, I think more people redline contracts and send them back. And sometimes it's not negotiable. Sometimes publications will come back, but a lot of the time publications will come back and say, okay. And you just have to, I do that a lot with confidentiality clauses, because I think that's a lot of how harassment stuff was perpetuated for a long time, was that people were signing confidentiality clauses, and they weren't able to go to anyone. I just finished reading Catch and Kill, so.
There you go.
Interesting, you talking about photo rights, since the New York Times put up the money for this, do you own the rights to your images, or do they own the rights to your images?
So we both own the copyright. It's a shared copyright with the Times. Okay. And that's the case.
So essentially they can use it for whatever they want, but you can also do whatever you want with it.
So whenever they, and I don't have to, they have an embargo period that's, I don't know the exact number of days, but it's days, not weeks. And then you can resell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And have you resold them?
The images with this project? Yeah.
Yes.
We're trying to do a few different, there's been either, the conference came and they said, we're featuring the new members. We want to feature these portraits. So Celeste and I will often, because we have half and half basically, ended up working out that we shot more than half each, because we got to shoot some of the same people, both of us. But so we'll kind of work together and sell a package together.
Was there one person that you didn't get to shoot? You're like, darn it, I wanted to shoot them.
I wanted to shoot everybody, but it just physically was not feasible.
Yeah, of course.
But so I think we'd say we each got to photograph about 85, 90 members. So there's a lot of overlap between, especially the second, we shot over 2 weeks, 1 week in December, 1 week right after the new year. And the second week, especially once we got the sort of system down, we were able to sort of like make eye contact and be like, oh, and now we have another setup for you to go and be photographed on. So, yeah.
Interesting. So it's like, it was your idea, your pitch, but it became bigger than you to the point where other people were doing essentially your idea, right?
Well,
under the umbrella of New York Times.
It sort of became this. I went with the original concept, but then it became this project that, I think that was one of the best things, was as a freelancer, you don't get to work, or at least I don't get to work collaboratively. I don't work on teams a lot of the time. I work individually with an editor, but the editor is not in the field with me. So I think that that was one of the best parts, was that it was this team. We had 2 editors, 2 photographers, we had 2 assistants, it was just like this. And then all the design team at the paper, the web design team, the print design team. And then when it became a book, it was a whole other. So I think that was one of the best I've gotten that question a couple times about like, did you feel weird letting go of your idea? I was like, at some point, it's no longer your idea. It's the group's concept, and the group sort of work together, which was great.
It had to be like that because, like you said, you couldn't do it on your own. So that was the only way it was going to get done. So
yeah.
Any difference or similarities in either of your two experiences, Travis or Evelyn, in terms of pitching projects to prospective buyers?
Nothing.
I mean, yeah, certainly. I've definitely dealt with a bunch of that, where, collaborative efforts and big productions and stuff like that, and stuff grows into stuff. And I'm mainly a solo shooter, but when I get to work on these huge projects with, assistants and lighting and people filming me doing it, and, hair and makeup and all this wonderful stuff, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's like your own little Hollywood movie. You get to shoot, and it's the same type of thing. You come up with a concept, but it takes the actors to bring it to life, and the lighting people, and it becomes bigger than you, and it's pretty amazing too. That you have an inception idea, and then it grows into something that even you didn't quite see, and larger than what you thought. And sometimes a lot, like someone brings some a little nugget that suddenly it becomes this bigger entity than you even came up with. So yeah, it's I love the whole process, and that's I think why I'm a photographer. Is that you can literally take your camera and go out and be solo, or you can work with tons of people and be as collaborative as you want, and that's what makes it so fun and dynamic. For as a profession for me.
Yeah.
I think, Elizabeth, you hit on something interesting as a freelancer, which sometimes I miss. Like when you work as a freelancer, even if you shoot a big story, you don't necessarily get the same amount of web designers, graphic designers, layout people working on your package that maybe a staff photographer would get. And that for me it's so rewarding when they put like the whole team on something and you get this amazing iPhone presentation and web presentation. So I think that would be, that's worth a lot, that team effort and like turning something, just the visual image into something, a package that's so much bigger than you can do as a photographer. But I pitch stories, but usually it's in collaboration with one writer and we just go out and do the stories. So that's your question, Dave. Yeah.
I usually just pitch stories to my wife in terms of family photo shoots, and then she vetoes all of them and does what she wants to do. So I'm like, okay, happy wife, happy life.
Bosses.
Indeed. Gotta please the boss. Let's move on to our last topic this evening. We're talking about Twitter, which, by the way, you can follow us at Around the Lens on Twitter. Plug. Twitter just is going to have some new terms of service that take effect on January 1st. And pretty much here they say that anything you post on their website they own can redistribute and do whatever they want with. This is sort of, I would say, a bit more, I don't know how their last terms of service went exactly, but it seems like this is a bit more, how do I say, draconian / overbearing with regard to, what they're going to do. Now, I don't see them actually, taking your imagery and creating, necessarily selling it for profit or whatnot, but it is scary to think that, you're going to post something and then they're going to use it however they want and they're not going to compensate you for it. And, just kind of lead into some rights issues if perhaps someone decides to embed your photograph in their story using the Twitter embed tool. And now they're circumventing the need to pay you for the rights to use your image because they're getting it through Twitter. So obviously there's been, lots of legal cases and up and downs with that. But what do you all think about this? Are you worried about your imagery being on Twitter and as our resident Instagram file there, Travis? Does Instagram have any sort of similar states? You're the one who loves engaging on social media the most, I would say. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, we've gone through the same kind of panics of terms of service, just like this through Instagram and Facebook. Everyone kind of freaks out and says, "Oh my God, they're going to steal something," and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that may be the case, but they've never done it, and it seems the larger legal battle of that and them doing that has never been kind of really fully tested yet. And there's been little pokes, but they've never really taken a photograph and like used it for anything like, oh, we're going to use this for advertising, we're going to use this, for books and stuff like that. Never done that yet. And I think Twitter is jockeying just to do the same kind of terms of service. And I don't know if it's for more self-promotion of what they're doing. I don't think they're going to use it for books and ads and stuff like that. But, at least there's some hope. Twitter bans certain people and hate and stuff like that, which Facebook is not doing. So I have a little more trust in them at present. Than some of the other big ones like Facebook, which is just really, I put so much time and connect to so many people on Facebook, and every day I'm like, maybe I should just drop them because I'm not in agreement with what he's doing, and especially letting ads and political ads that knowingly are false and stuff like that. And just taking the money and saying it's not a responsibility. I have a real problem with that, but I put so much into it. It's hard to just pull away from that, and so it's a real kind of social conflict I'm having in my head on that. But I don't think I think this Twitter thing's just a story right now, and I don't think it's anything to raise your hairs and get worried about. And I don't really use Twitter because I'm a visual person. I've never seen Twitter. Of course, you can post an image, but it's just not the same as Instagram or Facebook for me, or
Right.
or any of those types of things.
No, that's the thing I was thinking too, is like, I never thought of Twitter as like a platform for visual journalism, for photography, anything. I mean, it's basically, I go there and I see people tweet storming and tweet fighting and stuff like that. But, most of the stuff on there is like memes and whatnot. I think it's interesting though, where, like, say you can, if you apply this to Instagram or other platforms that are more photo focused, I wonder if Instagram said, we hereby own the rights to your imagery, and they do things with it, would you not use that platform? Would you change the way you present imagery on that platform? Perhaps watermarking it more often, or
I think
changing
it's very
resolution?
easy way. I'm very conscious of only putting up, a certain amount of DPI and long edge pixel on my, so it can't be blown up and it can't be on. But if they were going to say we're going to steal your image, maybe I'd embed big old Travis in there, and you want to use it, fine, it's free advertising for me, boom, go for it, and take advantage of it that way. But I think when we see the first person it happens to, well, you would see a mass exodus if they actually did that. So I don't think they would do that. It'd be if the first big photographer they take and they use their stuff, then they would lose so many people instantly that I don't see it as a benefit for them, and it would be a very crashing situation for them.
I also think that someone said somewhere that any service that you're using that's free, you are what your data, your whatever you're uploading there, you are that's how
you're the product
for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so I think that that's something that's I try and keep in mind whenever I use anything, that whatever I'm providing them by engagement, by data that I'm putting in, by data that they're collecting is what they're taking away. So that's sort of I think that more, I read the clause, and it just in the new terms of service, the rights, whatever you're uploading, they own, they can sublicense. And the language is just so familiar to a bunch of contracts that I've received, going back to what we talked about before, and how important it is to read through contracts that you receive from clients and negotiate your contracts, because they are often negotiable. And that is some of the best advice. That when I realized, when I was a young photographer and, would read through every contract I received, but didn't realize I can go back with it, with edits, as soon as I found out that you could, that was some of the best advice I've ever received, because I think it's so important and the number of photographers that I meet that talk about contracts that they've signed 8 years ago when they were just starting and didn't realize they can negotiate them and need to go back and revise them later on, which publications are often also willing to do if you have an established relationship with them and you signed it a long time ago. That is super
And
important.
the truth of the matter is if someone presents something, they may just maybe they won't read it, or we'll just we'll lock this in. But as soon as you do strike something out, they take you a lot more seriously. They're like, oh well, maybe we got to take this person seriously. It changes the level, and even when you don't think, if you question stuff, then it just puts you in a better position, I think, and it makes you then take you more seriously. Always come back with one cross.
You guys really have good experiences. I had a client, well, I'm going to name the client. I had Kaiser Health News approach me to shoot a feature this year, and it was local, and I read the contract very carefully, and there was one sentence that if I went out and shot the story and then it wasn't published, I wasn't going to get paid.
Oh my God.
I headlined it, and the editor was like, well, I have to run it up the flagpole, would not budge on that. Now, I knew that this story was not going to get killed because a staff writer was flying in, but you never know. There could have been some major health news and it just got canned.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do it. And so they hired another photographer locally. And so it doesn't always go in your favor, but I felt like, okay, this client isn't going to necessarily change my life and my career, but it angered me to the core. And I was really mad. I mean, I understand another photographer needs work, but that seemed like a ridiculous thing. And I posted on Facebook. I tried to get some exposure, and a bunch of other writers chimed in and said, well, that happens to us all the time. Like if our stories don't get published, we don't get paid. And I said, well, that's not the way it works for photographers. And I don't know why you guys, or they get a kill fee. But anyway, so, you can
a kill fee.
Yeah.
If they don't run your story, kill fee. That happens too if you don't shoot something. Like if it gets sold before
you're assigned,
I've got a bunch of kill fees.
But so it's great that we all do that. But I didn't win, and I couldn't understand why the photo editor who sought me out. I didn't approach them. They found me. They wanted to work with me. Wouldn't it was like $400 or something. It's like, why wouldn't they stand up for the photographers?
I think it's a good signal I think it's like a good way to gauge if there's something really egregious in the contract and they won't change it. That's a client. This is something that you have to, if you're trying to make a living, this is something that might not always be possible. But I think if you are super busy and you're deciding I think that like making sure that you're working with clients that will prioritize your safety and your rights is super important.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's a good signaling mechanism that that if they won't even pay you for work that you've already done, regardless of whether or not it's going to be published, is something that's like, okay, if this client won't even do that bare minimum, then that's something that's good to know.
Yep.
Yeah, no, stand up for yourself and definitely stand up for what you think is right. Now, if you're going on there and being like, listen, I want brown M&Ms.
No. I think that there's a fundamental difference though between there's nothing diva-esque about saying like, I need to get paid on time. I need to be safe.
I spent my time. I used my car, used my equipment. I didn't take any other assignments.
Yeah.
And because you end up not publishing the story, you're going to hire me, but then not pay me. I mean, it's beyond
it's an editorial decision. And the people that are employed by whatever the publication is have a salary. Their salary is not getting withheld because they're. So I think that's like super important and a really good point to bring up.
Yeah. And a little self-promotion here. That's why organizations such as mine are very important, like American Photographic Artists, because we sit there, we're stronger as a larger voice than solo voices. And if we support each other and lobby for each other and we're out there, it gives us a stronger foot to stand on. So it's one of the reasons, that, APA is so important to me. It's like, we'll send down and lobby for the CASE Act and lobby for, copyright law and stuff like that in Washington, and really support our photographers and give a network of people that kind of, hey, they put this in my contract. Should I do this? And we can really kind of sound off on each other and help each other.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about this, with regard to payment, right? Is the contract identify how you get paid? So for instance, is like, I'll get paid in 30 days, 60 days. I keep on hearing like they're trying to push back when they actually pay you for your effort, or is it something like, I want to get paid right now as I do?
Usually the bigger and more money they have, the longer they take to pay you.
Right.
It varies publication by publication, I know photographers that are very good about putting in late fees, especially if you're fronting expenses. You're paying late fees on your credit cards if you're not getting you're not getting reimbursed in time and you don't have savings. So there are some photographers that are very good about including late fees and interest charges in their invoices. And I think that that's just a case by case knowing, I think there are some publications that are pay on time always, and there are some publications that never pay on time and it's a fight. So I think that,
there has to be, I think the more upfront you are in asking and doing your due diligence of asking the questions up front and not being just, it'll be okay. You really need to ask those questions up front, and you have to have your little list of like, when am I getting paid? Is there late fee? You have to be really upfront about all this.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, if there's nothing else you all want to add on this particular subject, we can wrap up this week's show. Elizabeth, go ahead and throw out where people can find out more about you or your work or something you'd like to highlight.
Sure. I have a website. It's my full name with my middle initial, ElizabethDHerman.com. My Instagram handle is the same. And thank you guys so much for having me. I think it's incredibly important to talk about all these sorts of, all these contract issues and advocating for yourself, especially as you're working independently, and how to, form connections with other photographers and other groups so that you can advocate for yourself more effectively. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned your Instagram handle, but you didn't mention your Twitter handle.
I don't use Twitter, and it's different from my Twitter handle is Biz Herman. If you want to,
yes, that was difficult to find.
You want to see retweeted dog tweets, then that's my content that I post mostly there. But it's whichever you want to follow. There's more content on my Instagram, but the dog content is very good, but it's not my own.
I want to see those dog tweets. Ruff, ruff. Ow, wow. Ruff, ruff, ruff. Evelyn, anything for us before we sign off tonight or this morning?
Everybody have a good week. Enjoy. If you're like me, it's like holiday party central, squeezed into a busy work week. So enjoy the season. Twitter, yes, follow at Around the Lens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I followed. Yeah. So there you go. Everybody have a good week. Thanks, Elizabeth, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Travis?
Yeah, as always, can you continue the conversation and tell us what you like, don't like, and follow up or continue this conversation going, please reach out to us at Around the Lens. We always love your response, and it helps us program what we do in the future and how we guide ourselves and create content for you. If you want to find out more about organizations such as APA, which I'm chairman of in New York, then please reach out, because we're really there to support you and build a community that looks after each other. Happy holidays to everyone, and thank you, guests, for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Of course.
Indeed, and just so everybody's aware, next week will be the last episode, recorded live episode of the year. So that's December 16th. We're going to have that episode, and then we're going to take off 2 weeks. But I will be publishing our year in review episode. So if there's any best of bits or moments from the year you think I should include in that, please let me know. Go ahead and send me an email, or catch me via any of the other platforms. Beyond that, again, I want to thank our guest, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for taking time out to be on the show. Truly appreciate it.
Nice.
You're always welcome back.
Thanks.
For Evelyn Hochstein and Travis Keys, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 204, and we are out.
Thanks for listening to Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show. To continue the conversation, head on over to one of our social media outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. To support the show financially, consider donating to us via Patreon. For show notes from this week's episode and links to everything else we talked about, just go to our website, aroundthelens.com. Finally, if you or someone you know might be a good guest for the show, get in touch with us via email at info@aroundthelens.com.